The event will be funded by the American Family Association, which operates nearly 200 Christian radio stations across the country. Here is a sampling of what you can hear on their flagship show hosted by Brian Fisher.
Was it a crime or not?
Absolutely not. Now, let me sort of educate Judge Napolitano.
Judge Napolitano is a fool.
Judge Napolitano just doesn't like the President of the United States. He's a disappointed office seeker. He didn't get the seat on the Supreme Court that he desperately wanted, and he's been mad about it ever since. The Office of Legal Counsel has said that requesting information from a foreign government is not a thing of value. It is not a foreign contribution.
Could you say whether or not under a Warren administration would your vice president child be allowed to serve on a board of a foreign company?
No.
Why not?
I don't.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to this brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable. As always, glad to have you in the conversation. Just a programming note, I will be out of town tomorrow and Monday. I'll be going to a speaking engagement in Clovis, New Mexico. And if you live in Clovis, New Mexico, or anywhere in that neighborhood, I'm going to be speaking at Central Baptist Church. Michael Kirby is the pastor there. Speaking at Central Baptist Church in Clovis, New Mexico on Saturday night to dads and their sons. And then on Sunday morning, both worship services. I'll be talking on Sunday morning about standing in the gap from Ezekiel 22. Saturday night, talking about 7 things that fathers need to teach their sons. So if you're in the Clovis, New Mexico area, please come and join us. I hope you will do that. And Fred Jackson will be capably filling in for me both tomorrow and on Monday. Just a quick mention that we've got a share-a-thon coming up. We're listener-supported. We depend on you. I depend on you to provide the resources that keep this voice on the air. We have our annual fall share-a-thon coming up in October, and we're gathering stories right now that we would like to use during our October share-a-thon. We'd like to hear from you. So if AFR, or Focal Point in particular, since that's the listening audience we're talking about right now, if Focal Point has made a difference in your life, or any other program on American Family Radio, if we've been there to give you the right thought at the right time, to give you perspective, to give you information, to give you a way to process what's going on in your culture, we'd love to hear your AFR story. It will be a blessing and an encouragement to many others, and will help us with our fall share-a-thon. You can call, just takes a minute or two, call this number, and you might even hear yourself on AFR during the share-a-thon. The number to call to record your listener story is 877-876-8893, 877-876-8893. That is the number to call. All right, very quickly, we want to jump into the Word of God. I want to talk today briefly about the difference between license and legalism. And Jesus was an opponent of both. And he says this is the problem with the Pharisees and with the lawyers of his day, is that they were prohibiting things that God permitted, and they were permitting things that God prohibited. And that's the issue that Jesus has with his opponents, his political opponents, his cultural opponents in that day. So it begins with him going to a Pharisee's house for dinner, and the Pharisees at that time had passed a law. There's a little ritual you got to follow. If you're a guest in somebody else's house, here's a ritual that you have to follow before you eat. There'll be these stone jugs there, right there by the door. You got to take the little ladle. You got to pour it out over your hand. You got to pour it out starting on the wrist. Let it drip down to the bottom of your fingers and roll off. Then do the same thing with the underhand. Pour the water out of the ladle at the wrist and let it run down off the hand. And unless you've done that, you're unclean when you sit down to eat. And Jesus didn't obey any of that. He didn't observe any of that. And this Pharisee complained about it. How do you not wash before dinner? That's not the washing that you have your kids do. They got to wash their hands, they get the dirt off their face. This was a ritual thing. It was a ceremonial thing. Everybody'd wash before they went to dinner at somebody's house. They still had to go through this Mickey Mouse ritual. And Jesus said this, you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You fools, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? His point being, look, God, the same God made the inside and made the outside. If you think God expects the outside to become clean, what do you think he's going to expect regarding the inside? And you Pharisees are ignoring the expectation that God has made is that your insides will be as clean as the outside. Now, Jesus did not say it's okay to be a slob. That's not what he's talking about here. No, because God is a fan of cleanliness. You know, we tell kids that cleanliness is next to godliness. I discovered in my experience as a parent that cleanliness is next to impossible. But that's kind of beside the story. But Jesus' point here is that God wants us to be as clean on the inside, where nobody can see us except God, as we are on the outside. In fact, God is much more concerned about the dirt that's on the inside of us than the dirt that's on the outside. Now, there's two great errors in the church today. One is the error of license. This is where we permit things that God forbids. And then there is legalism, where we forbid things that God permits. Talks about this in verse 41 of Luke 11. You tithe mint and rue and every herb. So in order to keep the law concerning tithing, they're getting their celery stalks out on the counter, and they're chopping them up into 10 little pieces and taking one of those pieces to church with them on Sunday to throw in the collection plate. But, he says, you neglect justice and the love of God. Those are the important issues in life, justice and the love for God. You neglect those things. You ignore them. You don't pay any attention to those things. These, he says, you ought to have done without neglecting the others. So Jesus is saying, look, I appreciate your attention to detail, appreciate your commitment to tithing. That's good. Don't stop doing that. But while you're doing that, be sure you take care of the inside of the saucer as well. So Jesus is not saying, look, hey, it's cool not to give to God. He's not saying that. It's cool not to give to the work of the kingdom. He says, no, you should do that. But in the process, don't forget to pursue justice and the love of God. Now notice Jesus says we can be faithful tithers. Pharisees were. Everything looks impressive on the outside. People see us throwing our check into the offering plate. But we can do it without having any love in our hearts for God. So what did the Pharisees love more than they loved God? Woe to you, Pharisees, Jesus says. You love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplace. Now notice it's not that they have the best seats in the synagogues or they receive greetings in the marketplace. It's that they love it. You angle for it. You've got to have it. You hunger for it. You love to be in a place where you will be noticed and people are noticing you. So Jesus says this makes you like unmarked graves. People walk over them without knowing it. You know, one of my mentors said things are more caught than taught. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. Those who are in leadership and yet are hung up on being noticed, being admired, being recognized, being honored, are defiling the people around them by their example, because people will begin to imitate them. Every pupil, when he is fully trained, will be like his master. So they don't even realize that by imitating their leaders, their souls and spirits are being contaminated. It's like walking across these unmarked tombs and being defiled in the process. So our goal is to ask God to help us to clean out the inside, not just the outside. Ask him to purge us, to purify us, to cleanse us from the inside out. Well, let's take these things to prayer if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord Jesus, I pray today in your name that you will help me, that you will help my family, that you will help every member of the Focal Point listening audience, every man, woman, and child right now listening to the sound of my voice. I also pray in your name for our elected officials, for our city council members, for our mayors, for our governor, and for our president, that you will help us to avoid the sins of the Pharisees so that we may not bring your judgment down on us. I pray that we will not just clean the outside of the cup and dish, but instead be cleansed inwardly from every kind of greed and wickedness. May we give as alms those things that are within, that everything may be clean for us. I pray that we will give you a tenth, and yet not neglect justice and the love of God. May we practice the latter without leaving the former undone. Protect us from an excessive fondness for prominent position or public attention. I pray that we will not have a contaminating influence on people around us, but rather a purifying one. I pray that in seeking to communicate your truth to others, we will not load people down with burdens they can hardly carry. Instead, may we help them see that your burden is light and help them bear that burden instead of failing to lift a finger to help. I pray for us and for our entire community that we will embrace rather than reject the prophets and apostles that you send, those men who speak your truth to us. Please use us to offer to others the key of knowledge instead of taking it away from them, and use us to help rather than hinder those who are entering your kingdom. It's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right, a couple of quick items before we turn our attention to the news of the day. I want to mention that I have a column that'll be going up at afa.net fairly soon. Well, in fact, it's up there right now. Title of the column is All You Need to Know About Straws and the Environment. There's an obsession right now among regressives to get rid of plastic straws. They want to ban single-use plastic straws. And there are businesses that have already started doing this. Seattle's done that, not far from where I live here in the Puget Sound area. Seattle has banned single-use straw. Let's see who else has done it. Starbucks is in the process of phasing them out by 2020. McDonald's and Alaska Airlines are in the process of ditching single-use plastic straws. So good idea, bad idea, what's the deal? That's what my column is all about. You can get the answer to these questions by going to afa.net. It's on the stand, main website, afa.net. Right there on the main page there, you'll see this column, all you need to know about straws and the environment. I think there'll be a lot of things in there that you probably did not know, but will be glad that you do know because you listened to my counsel and you read the column. All right, a couple of quick items as we're heading toward the break. You know, we've talked about this abortionist, 2,246 hermetically sealed cadavers, baby cadavers. Kept them all in fluid, put them in a plastic sack, put them all in a little shoebox, stacked them up like cordwood in his garage. I mean, this is as ghoulish as anything you can picture. You would think that this would be a news story. Well, no, it's not. The only outlet that bothered even to cover the story was Fox News. CNN gave it 30 seconds. New York Times offered one story deep inside the paper on page 822. ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, NPR, PBS did not cover it at all. So that's what's going on in the news. All the news that they don't want you to know. That's the motto for the New York Times. Now here's another story of the excesses with Child and Family Services. Here's a family that had their newborn baby taken away from them by Child Protective Services because they politely declined to have their newborn baby receive a vitamin K injection. This is routine. Hospital said, you don't want to have it, we'll give you a waiver you can sign. Everything will be fine. They never gave him the waiver. When the parents objected to the vitamin K injection, the nurse took her out of the room and they didn't see the child again for 12 hours. More abuses in the name of the law. Be right back. Stay with us.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. I love these stories about environmental wackoism. Here's a story from Fremont, California. This is in the Bay Area. And there was a patrol car, a Tesla electric patrol car, chasing down a bad guy. And the battery died in the middle of the pursuit because somebody forgot to plug in the electric car. So anyway, that's the latest on the environmental eco-warrior front. One piece of good news, by the way, out of the news today is that a sixth city in Texas has declared itself a sanctuary city for the unborn. You get all these sanctuary cities that are sanctuary cities for illegal aliens. And by the way, there are cities in the Southwest that have had it up to here because what's happening, because Democrats will not allow President Trump to build a wall, seal up the border. The Border Patrol's got to do something with the hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens that they apprehend. So they've been loading them. They don't have space for them. They load them up on buses and they dump them in El Paso and they dump them in these communities. And they're getting fed up with it because they have to take care of these people. And they don't have any federal help in doing it. So their budgets are being drained by taking care of these migrants that they didn't ask for, that they do not want in their communities, that President Trump does not want in their communities, but the Democrats will not allow the changes to take place that would protect these cities. Anyway, 6 cities in Texas now have become sanctuary cities for the unborn, the latest from Gilmer City Council. So that is one of our winnable war moments for the day. All right, got a read report for the day just before we jump into the news of the day. Jeff Reed with his daily read report. Jeff, what do you got for us today?
Well, there's a new study out by the Journal of Religion, Media, and Digital Culture that did a study on the use of either a paper Bible or an electronic Bible. And what they found, they didn't set out to find this, but what they discovered was that men are less likely to retain information when using an electronic Bible. Now, women seem to do equally. They can retain on either one. Although women did complain about electronic Bibles, saying that there's a tendency, you don't feel as close to the words and you tend to skim through them like emails, kind of. So,
yeah. You know,
but
we had that.
It's not completely bad news for the guys. The men are more likely to finish a Bible plan by using electronic Bibles.
Wow, that's a good deal because you can whip the thing out any time and do some reading and stay right up with it. Well, we had that email I read yesterday from that woman. That was her experience. She was using the Bible, and she just went through it too fast. So she had to slow herself down. So she slowed herself down by copying word for word the Gospel of Luke.
And among all the participants, 66% said they preferred print Bibles for long study or for Bible study, long readings or Bible study.
Yeah. Well, I just think I use both. I use the digital Bible. I take my digital Bible with me to church because I've got all my language tools in my iPhone. So if the pastor is teaching on a passage in the Old Testament, I can look it up in the Hebrew. If it's in the New Testament, I can look it up in the Greek. I can do word studies while I'm listening to the message. So I use a digital Bible, but I love handling a Bible, turning the pages, marking it up, writing in the margins, all that kind of stuff I really love. All right. Thank you, Jeff. By the way, Elizabeth Warren is now past Joe Biden in a nationwide poll. She's got 27% of Democrats and Democrat leaders, and Joe Biden is down to 25. Bernie Sanders sucking some swamp water. He's down to 16. He's starting to fade in a big hurry. And Joe Biden is nosediving in some of the early state polls. Some of the states where they have early primaries, he's dropping like a rock. So I think this whole whistleblower thing, I think it's bouncing back on Joe Biden because people are finding out about this corrupt arrangement that he arranged for his son to have with Ukraine. $160,000 a month for his company, $50,000 a month directly into his pocket for 4 years. I think, man, that just stinks. And he doesn't know anything about Ukraine, didn't know anything about energy, but he's getting $50,000 a year to sit on the board of this energy company. He doesn't know anything about anything. So they know that there's something corrupt about that, and I think that's affecting his standing in the polls. All right, well, let's turn our attention to what's going on with that. We had this hearing this morning. James McGuire, or Joe McGuire, whatever his first name is the acting director of National Intelligence, and he was grilled for 3.5 hours by that smarmy Adam Schiff. I mean, I got to confess, ladies, I see that guy, I see that smug look on his face, and I tell you, it takes all of the self-restraint I have not to slap my computer screen right across his cheek. But anyway, so he's leading the grilling of this McGuire guy. And there's a couple of things I believe that are very important before we go to the sound bites. A couple of things that are very important to understand about all of this. Number one, Nancy Pelosi's talking about impeachment, but what she's doing is just a show. There's no substance to it. There's no legal significance to it. In order to have a formal impeachment inquiry, you've got to have a vote, and you have to convene committees. You have to pass the resolution out. She's not doing any of that. So she's just going to keep doing what they're doing because she thinks it's working. Because what she wants to do, she's treating Trump like a piñata. It's like you have a piñata in your garage, and the rope is hanging over the rafters there, and then the piñata is hanging down there, and every kid in the neighborhood comes over and takes a whack at it. Well, that's what she wants. She wants Trump to keep dangling in the garage so every Democrat on the planet can take a swing at him with a Louisville slugger. And she sees no reason to stop that. If you have an actual impeachment trial and Trump is exonerated, he's not convicted. It's like the Mueller report. You've got bupkis, you've got zip, you've got nada. But if you don't have the impeachment trial, she's never going to do it. Trust me on this, ladies and gentlemen. It is not going to happen because she's getting what she needs out of this whole process. They do not want this thing to go away. They don't want it to be resolved. So there is no way they're going to give Donald Trump his day in court. Now, what we know about this whistleblower, I've read through the whistleblower account, and I'll tell you what is striking about this guy is there is absolutely no firsthand eyewitness testimony in this report. The whistleblower did not see or hear anything. I just want to read you some examples. I think I've got Rob, will you find that John Ratliff? I got a couple of this by John Ratliff. Yeah, I guess we starts with R3 there. I want to play those. But I just want to just sift through the whistleblower complaint. By the way, this guy's not even a whistleblower. You know where the whistleblower ID came from? That comes from the world of athletics, where you have what? You have referees. You have referees in football. You have referees in basketball. They see an infraction. What do? They blow the whistle. And that's the way it works. They see it. They can blow the whistle. This guy hasn't seen nothing. Didn't see bupkis. Didn't see schmatz. So to call this guy a whistleblower is just ridiculous. It's completely phony. And remember, the biblical standard for taking some kind of accusation seriously is this. It is by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses that every fact is confirmed. How many witnesses are there to this whistleblower report? The answer to that question would be 0. Nada, bupkis, schmatz. This whistleblower complaint never should have seen the light of day. It's just absurd. It's irresponsible to let something that's entirely based on innuendo and hearsay and rumor get this far in the pipeline. Now, this guy was clearly part of the deep state. We're reading stories today now that the Inspector General found that this guy was not a Trump fan. He was against Trump. He wanted Trump to lose. He was part of the insurance policy for Donald Trump. You've got all these Obama sympathizers, these Obama holdovers that are deep in the intelligence community. They detest Donald Trump. They want to take him down. They want to cut him off at the knees, and that's what this guy is doing. He hates Trump. He's a Trump hater, just trying to take him out. You know, and the McGuire explained to the committee today, look, the reason that this whistleblower thing did not get to Congress earlier is it's against the law for them to get this. That's what people are missing here. I want to make sure you understand. It would be against the law for this thing to go to Congress. Why? Because they're blowing the whistle on somebody who's not part of the intelligence community. The law is very clear that a whistleblower, the complaints can only be sent to Congress if the person on whom the whistle is blown is a member of the intelligence community. Donald Trump is not part of the intelligence apparatus. He's not part of the intelligence community. And this is what the Director of National Intelligence said today. Look, the reason this didn't come forward is I don't have any authority over the president. The president doesn't work for me. The president doesn't answer to me. And the statute only gives me the authority to send whistleblowing reports to Congress if it's about somebody that is in the Intelligence Committee. So even the fact that this whistleblower thing was issued in the first place is a travesty. The fact that it got to Congress is an actual violation of the law. I mean, the ones that are breaking the law are the guys that are putting the pressure on everybody to get this report in the hands of Congress, contrary, you know, and the point was this was an Intelligence Committee hearing today. These are the people that wrote this law, and they're the ones that are upset that it took so long for this intelligence, this whistleblowing report to get to them. Well, they wrote the law that says it doesn't apply to somebody who isn't a part of the intelligence community. You know, and they're complaining that Donald Trump is guilty of an abuse of power here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. Listen to me carefully now. It is not an abuse of power for the president to do his job. It is not an abuse of power for the president to do his job. You know, the question here we ought to be talking about, is it a concern, should it be a concern to the President of the United States if there is corruption that takes place overseas, but it will impact the function of our government? Why would it impact it? Well, because now Joe Biden, who was the vice president at the time, he's got a lot of reasons to promote policies in Congress that are good for Ukraine. They might be bad for the United States, but they're good for Ukraine. We cannot afford that kind of corruption. So the president was just doing his job. That is not, ladies and gentlemen, an abuse of power. So once again, it is not an abuse of power for the president to do his job. All right, well, let's go to Representative John Ratcliffe, clip R3. And again, he reads from the report, which I was getting ready to do, but in the interest of time, I'm going to let John Ratcliffe read relevant portions to us. And he's reading right from the report itself. You know, let me back up a second. You know, whistleblowers got to be a referee, got to be somebody who sees the infraction. This guy didn't see nothing, and he's blowing the whistle. That's just not how it works. It'd be like a referee on the field, and he's hooked up by a walkie-talkie with somebody sitting in his car outside the stadium. And the guy sitting in the car says, hey, my son just got called for pass interference and he didn't do it. And so the referee immediately stops play and comes out and says, no, that's not a penalty because I was told by somebody that's not even here that it's not a penalty. That's what we got going here. All right, John Ratcliffe reading from the whistleblower's complaint.
The whistleblower says that I am deeply concerned, talking about the president, that there was a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, or violation of the law. The whistleblower then goes on to say, I was not a direct witness to the events described. However, I found my colleagues' accounts of this to be credible. And then talking about those accounts of which this whistleblower complaint is based on, the whistleblower tells us the officials that I spoke with told me, and I was told that, and I learned from multiple U.S. officials that, and White House officials told me that, and I also learned from multiple U.S. officials that. In other words, all of this is secondhand information. None of it is firsthand information.
None of it is firsthand information. I did the same thing that Representative Ratcliffe did. I read through it, highlighted all the places where he's talking about what people told him, who informed him about what they saw, what they heard. He even has accusations here that he's included that he's heard from people who heard about the accusation from somebody else. I mean, that's how bad this thing is. This is just a horrible, it's a travesty of justice that this thing is even out in the public and being talked about. All right, let's grab clip number R4. This is Representative Ratcliffe.
The whistleblower then goes on to cite additional sources besides those secondhand information. Those sources happen to include mainstream media. The sources that the whistleblower bases his complaints on include the Washington Post, the New York Times, Politico, The Hill, Bloomberg, ABC News, and others. In other words, much like the Steele dossier, the allegations in the whistleblower's complaints are based on third-hand mainstream media sources rather than first-hand information.
All right, so no first-hand information. The whistleblower didn't see or hear any of this. He wasn't privy to a phone call that President Trump had with the president of Ukraine. Didn't see or observe any of this. Doesn't have any first-hand information. And his corroborating sources are the media, which lie for a living. So, ladies and gentlemen, this thing ought to be taken out in the front drive of the White House. It should be set on fire because it's worthless. It's useless. And it's a sign of just how far we've declined from the standards of truth and justice that we would even entertain this, and we would occupy 3 hours of our legislators' time on this bilge. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Give us a call if you want to weigh in on this travesty of this report. Not even a whistleblower. He's a scandal monger. He's a rumor mongerer. You know what the Bible says about people that pass on slander? They pass on things that they heard about other people. It's a sin. What this guy's doing is an absolute rank sin. You know, and anybody that cooperates with this is just enabling this kind of reprehensible behavior to go on. So sorry to get worked up about this, but this is just horrible. This is so far beyond the pale. All right, let's grab clip number R2. Oh, the number, by the way, is 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. You got a comment or a question about this farce that we're observing, give us a call, 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact is confirmed. We have 0 witnesses. None. Zip. Nada. That means there is no fact that has been confirmed in this whole whistleblower account. All right. Now, I told you that I believe Nancy Pelosi wants to string this out. She does not want to get resolution because she's having too much fun beating up on Donald Trump, you know, and she can hand the Louisville Slugger to the New York Times. They take a whack. Hand one to the Washington Post. They take a whack. She's having way too much fun. She does not want this process to end. And here is Nancy. This is clip R2. Here's Nancy Pelosi today talking about this process, and see if she doesn't basically confirm what I am telling you. Clip R2.
There are some in our caucus who think, let's just have an impeachment. No, we have to have an inquiry to further establish the facts. There is no rush to judgment, and in some ways we are a jury, open to what might be exculpatory or not. But every day, the sadness grows because the disregard for our Constitution that the president has becomes more clear.
Oh, okay, so there's Nancy Pelosi just weeping for this country, but obviously in no hurry. She does not want an impeachment trial. I'll tell you another reason she doesn't want it. She knows Trump is going to be exonerated. There's no way in the world that Trump was going to be convicted by a Republican Senate. It's just not going to happen. So it would be they would lose all their leverage. They would lose the mileage they get out of beating up on Trump if he goes to an impeachment trial and gets exonerated. They've been through this with the Mueller report. All of their hopes were pinned on the Mueller report. The only reason this thing is even happening is because the Mueller report turned out to be a complete bust. So they're frantically looking for something else to do. By the way, Elizabeth Warren, I mentioned that she's in the lead now for the Democrats. You know those things they have outside car dealerships, you know, where they're hooked up to a pump, and they got a real thin tube, and they got arms, and the arms are flailing, and the hair is just being every which way. Well, on the Family Guy, they have a description. The Family Guy has a description for this thing. He calls it the wacky, wavy, arm-flailing, inflatable tube man. Well, that's what we got running for president. You ever seen pictures, of video of Elizabeth Warren dancing on stage to the music before her adoring electorate? Well, she is the wacky, wavy, inflatable, arm-flailing tube woman, and she wants to be your next president. All right, now, Nancy Pelosi says some people want to rush to judgment on this impeachment thing. One of them is Chris Matthews. Let's go to clip R1.
The Democrats, if they've got brains and any political savvy, will grab this moment. No more hearings, no more subpoenas, no more contempt citations, no more process. They've got them. And they got him because, imagine this, it's a high crime. It's not something in the statutes.
So we got to go get him. Go right now. Move on it. Have the impeachment hearing this afternoon. Convict him by 5. They've got him. He thinks that's the end of the story, end of the road for Trump. This whistleblower report, the phone call with the president of Ukraine. Now let's drop down to, where is that wacky wavy, inflatable arm flailing tube woman
Clip 4.
soundbite. That's clip number 4. Listen to Liz Warren dance on this, because she's asked, she doesn't realize it till she starts answering the question. She asks, should people that are in office, should they do what Joe Biden did? Listen to her trip all over herself. Here you go.
Could you say whether or not under a Warren administration would your vice president's child be allowed to serve on a board of a foreign company?
No.
Why
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the details.
Do you think there could be a problem?
I have to go back and look.
I'd have to go back and look. So that's your wacky, wavy, inflatable arm flailing tube candidate for the presidency, Elizabeth Warren. All right, let's see where I want to go. Let's go ahead and play clip 7 before we go to the phones. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. Clip 7. This is President Zelensky from Ukraine. Remember, the Democrats are out there. This was strong-armed. This was a mafia tactic. Wonderful country you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. This is coercion. This is pressure. This is blackmail. This is the mafia. This is the mob. So let's hear what President Zelensky has to say about all this. Clip 7.
President Zelensky, have you felt any pressure from President Trump to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden?
I think you read everything. So I think you read text. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be involved to democratic, open elections of USA. No, you heard that we had, I think, good phone call. It was normal. We spoke about many things, and so I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me.
Nobody pushed me. Nobody pushed me. That's the president of Ukraine. So that ends this whole charade right there. I mean, he's the guy that everybody on the left, or aggressives, were saying was shanghaied into this deal. He was strong-armed by Joe Biden, and he's saying, no, it didn't happen the way you guys are saying it did. Nobody pushed me. President Trump didn't push me. Very normal conversation, very friendly conversation. Nothing happened. 888-589-8840. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more soundbite before we go to the phones. Let's go to clip number. This is just fun. We may have to play the others tomorrow. Go to clip number 1. Remember, we played the soundbites yesterday. Joe Napolitano, by the way, Joe Napolitano, we're not going to have time to play the soundbite. We'll save him for tomorrow. Joe Napolitano was the one that's repeatedly saying that President Trump has committed a crime here. You know why he's saying that? He is not saying that because President Trump committed a crime. He knows good and well he didn't. Judge Napolitano is saying that because he is torqued at President Trump because President Trump did not nominate him to the Supreme Court. Napolitano had stars in his eyes. He's going to be on the bench with the rest of the august judges that sit on the Supreme Court, and Trump didn't do it. So he's been carrying this mat on for Donald Trump ever since then. This is about payback for Judge Napolitano. There's at least 5 or 6 times, I got a story about it in the stack, 5 or 6 times where Judge Napolitano has gone on Fox News and said what Trump did was illegal or was a crime, and it wasn't. So he's just on a vendetta. Mitt Romney, by the way, same deal. Mitt Romney is torqued that President Trump didn't pick him to be Secretary of State. So now he's trashing Trump every chance that he gets, which just verifies that Trump made a good decision by not picking him in the first place. All right, let us grab a call from Rick in West Monroe, Louisiana, named after the former President of the United States, James Monroe. Go ahead, Rick. Talk to me. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir, Mr. Fisher. Thank you for talking with me. I grew up and spent most of my life waiting for high noon so I could get Paul Harvey to make sense out of the news, and he's been gone for quite some time. And the truth is, I understand you best of all, so I always look forward to hearing you make sense out of the news now. And my question is this. do you have an inside track? I mean, it seems like everybody else in the news overlooks the things you say. Do they not know these things? There ought to be Republicans coming to the president's aid. There ought to be folks saying the same things as you. I'm going to hang up and let you answer, but I'm telling the truth. I do not understand, with the clarity of it, why the news keeps going in this one direction.
All right, Rick, well, listen, I appreciate the call. And, if I had an explanation as to why the Republicans do what they do, I could make gazillion bucks being a political strategist. Nobody knows why they do what they do or don't do what they don't do. What I will tell you is I believe that we have in the Republican Party, there is an invertebrate ring, an invertebrate wing of the GOP. An invertebrate is somebody without a spine. You've got the invertebrate wing of the GOP, and they are all the Republicans in Congress, virtually, without exception, belong to the invertebrate wing of the GOP. Why they're so timid, why they're so cowardly, why they have so little courage, man, I wish I had an answer to that question, but I do not. All right, let's grab a call from Stephen in St. Petersburg, Florida. What's on your mind, Stephen? Talk to me.
Hey, Brian. I know this is going to sound weird, but this phone call, of course, is all about Biden and his son. But Biden is not a political opponent of Trump, and he's trying to be, and the rate he's going, it'll be Elizabeth Warren. I know that sounds strange, but he's just really a regular citizen right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point, because technically speaking, there is no presidential campaign right now. Donald Trump has not been officially nominated. We don't know who the Democrat nominee is going to be. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be Joe Biden. I still think it's going to be the wacky, wavy, inflatable, arm-flailing tube woman. That's who I think is going to be the candidate for the Democrats. So it's really, from a technical standpoint, you're right. This is not digging up dirt on his opponent, because Joe Biden is not officially his opponent yet. All right, that's a very good comment. I appreciate that. Thank you, Stephen. Let's grab a call from Jonathan in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Jonathan, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, really like your show. Appreciate what you do and sharing all this information with us for sure.
Thank you.
I just know that, I think all this boils down to money. I mean, the Democrats are just scrambling for anything they can to get Trump out of office so they can start getting paid again. I mean, he's shutting things down left and right that are actually affecting their monetary intake, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a good point. That's a very, very good point, because the decisions that Trump has made are kind of cutting off the supply chain for the Democrats. They're losing kind of influence and sources of income because Donald Trump is making regulatory changes that cut off their air supply. All right, very good comment. Appreciate that. Let us go to Linda in North Dakota. Linda, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Well, thank you, Brian, for taking the phone call. I just totally agree that with all your other callers that basically the Democrats are scrambling to try and find something that they can pin on President Trump, no matter what it is. And the fake news that we have is so frustrating. And I believe that Joe Biden has a whole lot more to cover up here than what President Trump does, especially with his son Hunter, who's been involved in the Ukraine and all of his dealings there. So I feel like I am sick of the fake news. I'm sick of the lies that are coming out. And I hope that, like you just said, that we get some backbones in our Republicans and they stand up for what is right, because what's going on here is wrong. And I'm hoping that this is going to turn a lot of people away from the Democratic Party because of what they're doing.
Okay, Linda, I appreciate the call, and I agree with what you are saying there. And it's not so much that the Democrats even have a lot of affection for Joe Biden. They really don't. But they hate Trump. So some of this is about trying to protect Joe Biden, but this is mostly about trying to get Trump. Because they don't care who is the Democratic nominee as long as it's somebody they think can beat Donald Trump. And I think most Democrats now, and we saw this in the latest polls, they don't think Elizabeth Warren can hack it. They don't think that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump, and I think they are right about that. But their fervor doesn't abide, because they're going after, the real target is not to get Joe Biden in. The real target is to keep Donald Trump, kick Donald Trump out. All right, last call of the day. Let's go to Kathy in Baker City, Oregon, near my old hometown of Boise. What's on your mind, Kathy? Talk to me. Got about 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Well, thank you for taking my call and permission to come aboard.
Permission granted.
I watched the hearing this morning,
yes.
And I have to tell you, Brian, I was aghast at the demeanor of the Democrats inquiring. They would ask Mr. McGuire a question. As he was attempting to respond, they'd interrupt, ask the question again, and would not let him finish.
Yeah, it was. You're exactly right. You're exactly right, Kathy. It was just kind of rude. And you know what I thought looking at that hearing? This whole thing is what the Pharisees are doing, trying to trap him in something that he might say, just like they did with Jesus. We're fighting winnable war. We'll see you on Tuesday.